Tell me about Morag.
Morag started out as the voice of my great-grandmother, who I had never met. Obviously, she had passed away long before I appeared, but my grandmother talked a lot about her and about her working in the mill and then living across the street from the mill and what that was like to see her just going off to work and coming home after long, long, long days. And she died of mill fever. So it was that first connection that I had this voice in the back of my head that kind of kept talking and kept talking and kept talking, and she morphed into Morag. I wouldn't say that she isn't my great-grandmother definitively, but she started out from that little bit of information, and she turned into someone who I think was doing her best to hold it together in a time when everything was falling apart. Her family's falling apart, the world's falling apart, the town's falling apart, and then her health starts falling apart. And I think that was kind of the final straw for her. That was the end of her ability to hold it together, which is why she is able to take up, in a way, with the healer who magically comes to save her from her imminent death.
Mill fever is the lung condition.
Yeah.
What would we call it now?
I don't know what we would call it. It's anything that has to do with the lungs. So anything like a bronchitis or pneumonia, anything that you wouldn't be able to treat. Apparently, working in the mills, a lot of the jute fibers would wind up in their lungs and start coating their lungs, and that would obviously become a problem. They used to attempt to operate to get rid of it, and lots of times the surgery was successful, but the patient would still die. So it's that double-edged sword of their lifeline versus their actual life with working in the mill conditions.
The writer in the book is the mill owner. What his name is?
Desmond.
Yes. Very unpleasant chap.
He is. He's probably one of the only characters I've ever written who is just blatantly not a nice person. There is nothing redeeming about him, and we know that from initially meeting him. He's not going to turn out to be kind and wonderful and generous and true to his word. He's going to do what he's done for the past 20 years, 30 years, however long he's been involved in the mills. He was interesting to write because I didn't have to find something to like about him. He could just be this nasty person and continue to be him.
Carol, completely drawn to him, even though she knows. I mean, she's heard the stories. She's seen girls leave.
Exactly.
But yet.
I think that was my inspiration with her, was that she was someone who believed that she could change the situation, that this was her way out, that if she could get him to decide to leave his wife, because her perception, she's always been told that she's the pretty one, that all the men are paying attention to her, et cetera, and which is true, but there was nothing beyond that for her. All she thought she had to do was bat her eyes and he would come running. It's her own kind of her own gullibility about it, that she doesn't yet fully understand that she isn't that different than the other girls in the town. She wants to be desperately, but she's not in the end, and we see that she's not.
Both Carol and Wallace are attracted to bad boys. Like, what is it about these? Is it because they have nothing else?
I think that's exactly what it is. Their scope of what they're expecting their life is going to be is so small that they see everyone around them taking the same path. You'll wind up with a random husband who's probably not going to be the nicest guy.
As their own father was.
Exactly. That's what their experience is with men in general. So they're looking for anything kind of outside of the proverbial box. That they've seen what the men in this town, for the most part, have been like in the tenement buildings, the kind of the really working class, that they have long hours, they're not around a lot, they don't have great family relationships, and they're looking for anything that's not that. So that's why they've kind of both romanticized what their possibilities could be. And, you know, as logically thinking, they're not going to end well. You know, the mill owner's not going to leave his wife for a random girl from a tenement, and that in all likelihood, Wallace is not going to find miraculous love with someone she hasn't seen in 12 years or spoken to in that long. But it's the notion that there could be, I think, that keeps them going in a way, that they're hoping something else will happen.
Why write a novel set in Scotland when you're living, basically you're Canadian here? Yeah. Why go over there?
Every time I had gone to visit family, etc., the city itself had really interested me, partially because it is such an industrial town. Like, there were so many mills and so many shades of gray all the time going on, that something about it just really interested me. I was interested in the history, I was interested in the actual structure, and the more I kind of looked at it, or the more I researched it, or the more that I found out about it, the more interesting it became. And I think the topper was when I went to the Verdant Works site and got that quote from the very beginning, talking about how the women were allowed to be different because all the men were gone. And I thought that was the glimmer of, oh, there's something here, that they were different than other cities and other women at that time because of. And then how that kind of filters down to how that must have affected later generations, and what that kind of experience does for you and does for what you give to your children and the expectation of your life. And it just all tumbled together, and then I had the voice of Morag, and then that was it. I had to go with it.
Nicely done.
Good.
The book is Beyond the Blue. Speaking with the author Andrea MacPherson, and Beyond the Blue, published by Random House of Canada.